No, but one other thing I wanted to say just about the conversation from the other day was that I think part of what can feel jarring or unwelcoming, like some people were talking about like, screen time, or what do I do if my kids jumping off of high places, or these are just like challenges and sort of what we were talking about earlier that are just so far down Maslow's hierarchy that it's just like, or up, I don't know which way it goes, but that it's like, these are not the questions that I have. And I want to explore this space so I know how to handle those, like those are straightforward, get down.
Get down. Next.
So I feel like at the life school, when we're talking with parents about challenges, some of the conversations more so are around like, how do I balance, supporting them as they explore these interests, or if my child has this like learning challenge or something, or they're on the spectrum, how do I support them? How do I think about that as a family? Just like more complex questions. And not to judge like other parents and their questions, but it's like, how do we get past, like, have they figured out all of these other harder things, and that all that's left is these kind of, what feels like superficial questions, but maybe there's just more depth to them than I'm missing. But it's just like, I feel like when I'm talking with parents and like I'm struggling with like the social, emotional, just like deeper questions of their child's life. Maybe this is a bit too vague, but I'm hoping.
No, I will say this, that as a parent who's now been at home with my child for like 60 some odd days, who is not normally, I feel like our parenting conversations have sort of sunken down to that level because we have so much time to like be like, to like mull over every tiny thing. Whereas before it was like, is her spirit alive or not? If yes, then like today was a good day. She watched a lot of TV. She ate, she didn't, like we just didn't, when we were both working 8 hours a day, we just spent less time talking about those kind of working away from the home. We spent less time talking about those kinds of things.
I have two thoughts to that, Mikala. It's one, I think, or two pieces of a response. I think there's the sort of this line, like there's the parenting part of it, right? And then there's the schooling or how you approach education part of it, which for a parent, that line is blurred for sure, if it's even there. I think, and that's in the realm of like SDE and unschooling, deschooling, homeschooling people, where like the style, the way that you parent and stuff, sometimes can overlap with your philosophy and your approach to education. I've seen that happen where there's like this sort of weird middle ground, and I've seen like it be difficult to navigate that. And at the same time, like as an educator and getting deeper into this and doing it for longer now, if sometimes it feels very weird, I'll say, in that I'll find myself feeling led or compelled to do something or wondering if I should do something that then I'm like, does this fall outside the boundary of being like this kid's educator, mentor? Like, is this like parenting at this point? Or like, oh, somebody wants me to do something and I'm like, oh, that seems like a parenting thing, not an educator thing. But so much now, with just the way that Heartwood operates and the way our community operates, like so there's the gray area between that is getting bigger, I guess, and odder and more difficult to navigate and figure out, like, okay, what's your parents can handle this thing, and what's like, oh, this is my domain. And I just think, like, definitely for the parents, I think it's just like, the more you are into SDE, it's just like, the difference between those two sectors completely is going away anyways. That's why I think the conversation of like being concerned about like a kid jumping from a high place or whatever, like I can see that that seems like a distant sort of thing, like not a priority. Oh, that's in a parenting category, and this is how I parent, so be it. As far as education, that's where we can talk and we can wonder. But I think for some SDE-ish parents, the boundaries between those two things is like very leaky.
Okay, so that's not what I was saying at all. So
Oh.
yeah, so for me, working with the students, I'm perfectly comfortable. Like when you're here at school, I am your de facto parent-esque person, right? So if you're sad, we're gonna sit down, we're gonna talk about it. If you smell, we're gonna talk about that, and we're gonna go to the bathroom and sort this out, right? And then when your actual parent comes to pick you up, we're just gonna talk about all the things that happened today that they can like now I can pass on to them and they can go ahead and address, right? And every relationship with every parent, I feel like is different. Some people are more receptive to like, hey, let me point you to a hair salon. That would be for this type of hair. And some people aren't, as receptive to that. But I think and this may go into the difference between like each of our flavors of non-traditional schooling. And for family, our school, I would say, is a bit farther to the left or right, I don't know, on the spectrum of like more towards Montessori than Sudbury, I would say.
To the right.
Yeah.
The right or the left?
I think it's probably the right. Just keep like political left and right. That's probably more to the center or something. Yeah. So that there is more like, here's a class, and here are these graduation requirements. Like there's some more like specifics and formal structure around like how learning happens, but also this space and flexibility throughout the day for you to have a lot of choice in that. And so for a lot of our families, decision to say if you're on a high place you need to get down feels just very much in line with that versus like, let's see how it goes. Like
I feel like we should point out what your demographic is mainly. Do people know that who will watch this? I don't know.
The Life School is a non-traditional project-based high school in downtown Atlanta. We're transforming the high school experience. So we primarily serve low to middle income families of color. Though we serve other students as well. That's our primary target area. And so there is, I don't know, I guess you guys can speak to how much overlap there is or isn't to the communities that you have been a part of. But I think for a lot of our families, unless we're like outside playing and like climbing trees together, there's no scenario where a child is on a roof or on a other high place and the immediate response is get down immediately. There's just no scenario where that's like, let me think about how I would respond to that. Right?
And so I'm thinking just like the percentage of Black parents in the world who would disagree with you would be very small.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that matters in this world that we inhabit, this SDE world, especially if the lines are, that blurry, which they inevitably are, because when you're a small school, like it is like what you're describing. It's like, I parent a little, you parent a little. Can you coach me on this? I'll coach you on this. It's exactly like that. And so then, enter Black parenting style into this space, either through the educator or through the parent who can be a part of the school. And so now there's going to be some inevitable clash in that moment when kid wants to climb across the whatever it is. Unless, it's the small percentage that's being represented, which it often is actually, but you know what I'm saying? Like, that's where I think it can be, there's just another layer of like discomfort that can be created by, because I'm going to be honest with you guys. So I became a parent in the middle of Freedom to Grow. And I had a daughter for the last 2 years that I was doing the thing. And there were some things about my own parenting style that I was like super hiding from the community because I didn't want to get judged. I didn't want people to be like, oh, you're not a whatever. And now I don't trust you.
That's a frequent thing. A lot of parents do that.
Really?
Yeah, I pick up on it. Now after a few years, like a lot of parents, I can tell there's like, oh, they think that they have to be or parent a certain way because they're in this SDE space or community. And so they really like bite their tongue or like sort of try to like turn themselves down or whatever in certain instances.
Yeah.
And they're not sure if it's okay to say or approach certain things a certain way. And it's interesting.
And I think it's appropriate. Like, I think that was the appropriate decision on my part as the person in leadership with power wanting to create a welcoming space. There's some amount of like, gosh, I don't know how to say it. It's like you want to bring your full self into a space, but you want to have everybody be able to feel welcome. Mm-hmm. So that's what I was attempting to do, I think.
How do you all feel? I mean, I guess it feels like we're on the cusp of this subject. I discovered like we're unschooly people, whatever. But then I found out there's the boundary between that and parenting. Like there's unparenting as well, right? Which I think those two things sometimes overlap. Sometimes, or maybe a lot of times they don't, but they're like distinct sort of things that exist. And I had a light brush with that, I'll say that online, that Facebook community for a little while. And I was just like, oh, this is definitely not a cultural fit for me whatsoever. But I just wonder, like, do you all think that like what we're talking about now is more of the difference between unschooling and unparenting, the difference between like how I choose to parent and how I choose to school my young person?
Well, I mean, I think Akila puts a good frame on it to say that it's all about raising free people and what does that look like in your family, and that is different from family to family, the questions, and a lot of it will reflect on the things that you may have thought as you reflect on your own child were inhibiting, and how do I keep my child from those things? Or try to not reinforce the things that in reflection my parents did that didn't feel good or ended up causing XYZ kind of result. But sometimes I just think that some people have solved all the things and answered all the questions, and what's left is like, I don't know, maybe, yeah. That's how it comes off sometimes. Like, oh, if these are the questions that are left, then let's just be happy. Like, let's not feel like we have more to reflect on. This is where we are.
So you're a hierarchy of needs references. I had this idea in college. We were talking about this and like how a person might be at a certain level if another level is not met. And I don't think they're necessarily like in sequence. Like you have to have met these other things in order for you to address like the sort of higher needs, if you will. I think they can induce simultaneously like shift and change as your priority or them being met. So I don't know that you have to have I don't believe that you have to be in a situation of, having your food security, your housing security, and all those things being met and consistent in order for you to be able to also question like, how do I want to make my child go to bed at this certain time, or do I want to see if they can decide and like, let's talk about this, honey, later today and figure this out. Like, I don't think, I think all those things can happen whenever they happen. I don't think you have to be of a certain class in order to be able to discuss that. I think maybe there's some correlations there. But I don't know that.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like we're bashing that or like minimizing. At least I don't want to minimize those kinds of questions.
I don't want to minimize it either, Laura.
I just wanted to point out that if you gathered 10 Black parents, the conversation would have been different. And I don't even know exactly how, but you know.
For the reference, what's funny is that the sort of jumping from high place conversation that we're referencing, that was a Black mom who
it was.
who was talking about.
Oh, I love her too. Yeah.
I don't disagree with you though. Like, heck yeah. Get your ass down from there.
Right.
You break your leg, I'm not taking you to no damn hospital.
Right. I'm done. Yeah, because even like what's coming to mind is like the spanking conversation, which, you know, in this world is like, we're so past that. But like in our world, we're really not. And for someone to categorically say all of that is bad parenting, well, then you just like thrown a whole culture like under the bus. And I think that's worth considering. I just think that's worth saying. How could all of that whole thing that just happens to be, you know, not white, all be bad?
I think it's worth also pushing to say, like, why? You know, why is that, let's say, a person of color? Like, why is that a Black thing, the parenting thing? Where does that come from? Why is that there? Because I would hate to like you're saying, I would hate to pathologize a whole sort of culture's way of parenting, and consider it toxic and not acknowledge like where that style of parenting came from and why it was the sort of route or way in which they chose, like where that came from. I think it would be horribly irresponsible to judge that and not acknowledge that there are some things that happened, traumatic on a cultural level, things that caused it to be the way that these people operate.
Yeah. And I'm not advocating for that, but yeah, I really like how you just said that.